Laughter rolls over him like static, bright and careless. But Michael Reed doesn't flinch. He stands steady, hands loose at his sides, the kind of calm that makes noisy people check their volume. His wife is at the mic, eyes shining with victory that has nothing to do with marriage. She swats away his kiss as if it were a gnat. Then she summons the show. Derek's name slices the room. And a stranger's mouth takes what used to be his. The crowd reacts the way crowds do. A gasp. A cheer. 100 little judgments, dressed as entertainment. He lets it wash past. No raised voice. No plea. He didn't yell. He didn't beg. He made one call that ended her career. Tonight will prove a point most men learn the hard way. What happens in the next 10 minutes costs her everything. Stay with me. You'll see why a quiet man is the last man you should embarrass. Stay through the end for the 5 rules every man should follow to never be in this position. Listen close. Take what applies. And leave the rest. And when this is over, tell me, what would you do? He wasn't there for the room. He was there for his wife. He showed up in a suit that won't trend and shoes that won't start a conversation. He drinks water. Not courage. He knows the difference. The banner spells out her promotion in tall, confident letters. And that's fine with him. He's watched her work late. Watched her pace the kitchen with presentations in her head. He's clapped from the back row before. He can clap again. But applause has a way of fogging the glass. Compliments come easy when they aren't paying the bill. Ava stands at the center of it, basking in the warm dust of praise. And when Michael steps close enough to be introduced, she lets the moment slide by as if introductions are optional, as if he's the +1 to his own life. The smiles land on her like confetti. None land on him. He waits his turn. Patience is a habit, not a costume. When he asks for a dance, his voice is low, the kind you lean toward. She agrees because people are watching, not because she wants to be near him. Her posture says more than her lips ever will. She's rigid where he is open. She's performing where he is present. The song slows. The room softens. He leans for a simple touch, nothing greedy, nothing showy, just a husband's small claim on the night. She recoils, louder than the band without raising the mic. The laughers love a line, and she gives them one. The joke isn't new. But cruelty never ages. Control doesn't need applause. He learned that long ago. The hard way. When there was no audience, and no safety net, only bills. Blueprints. And a woman's promise to herself that her son would become the man no one could move. If you know you don't trade your center for a crowd's attention. You don't buy back respect from people who spend it like pocket change. So here's the truth. The room can't smell. Yet nothing in here is what it seems. The loudest person is the weakest. The brightest light is the easiest to burn out. The man by the wall, the one who didn't chase a toast or a handshake, has already made decisions that will outlive tonight. He came to honor, not to argue. He came to stand beside, not to stand down. And when the line is crossed, he won't push back with noise. He'll pull a thread you didn't notice, and the whole thing will come down by morning. He wasn't there for the room. He was there for his wife. And she treated him like a prop in her victory pose. That's the moment this story truly begins. Humiliation is loud. Power is quiet. The song slows. The chatter thins. And she turns the volume up on her performance like a switch. She doesn't whisper the insult. She gifts it to the room. Clear enough for the nearest tables to taste. A few people choke on their drinks. Someone laughs too hard. Relieved it isn't them. She wants witnesses. She wants an echo. She wants the kind of moment that sticks to a man's jacket long after the dry cleaner pretends it's gone. He doesn't give the room the show it wants. He doesn't bark a comeback or collect sympathy with a wounded glare. He keeps his shoulders level, and his breathing even. The practiced rhythm of a man who has survived worse than a microphone and an audience. He learned a long time ago that you don't fix disrespect with volume. You fix it with standards. He didn't move. He measured. She feeds the crowd again. Calling another man by name like a magician, revealing the final card. The air pulls tight. Heads turn on instinct. A smile that isn't for her husband appears. Sharp and practiced. And she seals it with a kiss that's made for cameras. Not for love. Gasps become whispers. Whispers turn into little verdicts on lips that never paid the price to judge. Somewhere. A friend pretends not to record. Somewhere else. A coworker decides which side of history pays better. He watches. Unblinking. And lets the noise do what noise does, burn hot and fast. Then eat its own oxygen. He understands what most people miss in moments like this. The person who needs the room is already losing. The person who needs nothing from it is already free. He does his math in silence. He counts the costs and the clauses. He knows what's on paper and where it's kept. He knows which calls matter and which don't. He knows the difference between anger and action. And tonight he won't confuse the two. She mistakes his stillness for weakness, because that's what performers do when the audience doesn't rise on cue. She mistakes the quiet for shame, the patience for fear, the restraint for surrender. She thinks she's written the ending by making everyone look. She doesn't see the part that isn't on stage, the part that makes the room irrelevant in the first place. So let the laugh land. Let the kiss land. Let the crowd do its little chorus. None of it changes who built the floor they're standing on. None of it shifts the weight of a signature that has carried payrolls, promotions, and promises she never paused to understand. Facts don't need applause. They need timing. He studies the moment the way a craftsman studies a seam, feeling for the precise point where one pull opens everything. There is a threshold where humiliation becomes instruction, and he steps across it calmly. He decides. Not if, but when. Not how loud, but how final. Some men swing their fists and feel powerful for 10 seconds. He will lift a finger and feel nothing at all. That's the point. Would you walk out or finish it here? That's the choice every man faces when the line is crossed in public. Leave the mess for tomorrow, or end the fiction while the ink is still wet. He makes his choice in a breath. The same breath he's been practicing for years, without calling it practice. The room is a storm. He is a barometer. Pressure falls. Decision rises. The call is coming. He never needed to be the face. He only needed to be the foundation. Long before the ballroom and the applause that doesn't age well, there were quiet apartments where the heater rattled like an old truck, and dinner stretched because a mother knew how to turn struggle into skill. Michael learned the math of scarcity before he learned algebra measure twice. Waste nothing. Pay what you owe. And owe as little as possible. His mother's hands told the story cracked from work. Steady from love. She taught him that silence can be shelter. That a man doesn't need an audience to be real. And that pride, if you must have it, should fit in your pocket. Nights were long and bright with a single lamp over a battered table. Blueprints instead of video games. Drafting instead of distractions. He traced lines until they behaved. Sanded edges until they disappeared. And built models that stood even when you breathed hard on them. He learned that strength is geometry. Weight spread right will hold forever. Weight thrown wrong will fail loudly. Promise yourself you'll build the first kind. Then, one day, life handed him a sealed envelope, thick with what-ifs. The inheritance arrived without ceremony, no cameras, no speeches. Just a meeting in a room where the windows didn't open. He read, listened, and told the truth. He didn't want a stage. He wanted a structure. He took control without taking the spotlight, folding his name into the ledgers and letting the executives do the handshakes. Papers were signed. The title majority shareholder lived in files. Not on his tongue. North Star Dynamics had a public face. And it wasn't his. He preferred it that way. Leaders he trusted carried the banner. He carried the keys. If you're waiting for a montage where he brags, you'll wait forever. He put his head down and made sure the right people were in the right seats. That the company ran on standards, not slogans. He watched numbers move, not likes. He learned which decisions echo for a decade and which die before lunch. The payroll cleared because he said so. The factory lights stayed on because he planned for the days when cash got shy. He never needed credit. He needed continuity. Ava entered the picture when ambition still looked like hunger. Not theater. He opened a door here and there, never a cheat. Never a shortcut. A callback when a resume deserved a second look. A wardrobe advance that matched the professional she intended to be. Training he quietly covered because excellence is cheaper than turnover. Later. A promotion her performance earned. Ushered through the proper channels. Rubber stamped only after the numbers made their own argument. She climbed fast. She never asked who built the ladder. He didn't demand loyalty. Just respect. And respect has a paper trail. Before vows. He insisted on clarity. An ironclad prenup that didn't whisper, but stated outright what happens when the line is crossed. Not a threat. A framework. If love lasts, the document sleeps. If it doesn't, it wakes up and keeps the peace better than any late-night argument ever could. In case she ever wondered, the clause wasn't about control. It was about boundaries. It said, in plain language, that betrayal has a cost, and that dignity won't invoice twice. So when the ballroom turned into a stage for someone else's moment, he didn't have to invent strength. He reached for what he'd already built: files. Facts. Standards that don't shake when the room gets loud. The men who survive storms don't raise their voices, they raise their thresholds. He isn't here to prove anything to strangers. He is here to protect the life he made real. In 60 seconds, the room learns who he is. Respect doesn't shout. It walks in the room and changes the weather. He feels the line tighten and, with the steadiness of a man who's finished his homework, he acts. No speech. No preamble. Just a breath. Then the sentence that closes one chapter and opens another: terminate Ava Reed. Effective immediately. He doesn't ask. He authorizes. Somewhere. A light flickers over a desk. Somewhere. A policy wakes up and stands on its own legs. Ava laughs. At first, there's always a laugh before understanding, and then, her phone glows against her palm, like a verdict arriving. A voice every employee knows, but few have met, speaks without tremor. Karen Mills identifies herself. Not for him, but for the record. She details what the record will say: misconduct at a company function. Violation of the code of conduct. Investigation opened. Provisional termination effective now. Access will be revoked. Materials will be collected. She reminds the parties that statements on social platforms are discouraged during ongoing review. No venom. Just process. When truth shows up, noise gets quiet. Ava's face cycles through the stage's humor. Confusion. Anger. Calculation. She looks for the edges of a bluff and finds a wall instead. She searches the room for an ally and finds observers. The kind who keep their jobs because they know when to let silence do the talking. Michael doesn't stare her down or feed the moment with triumph. He has no appetite for victory laps. He's here to close a loop with a signature he wrote years ago. On documents that protect peace, when love forgets how. The air shifts. Phones tilt. Even the band seems to feel it. That click you hear when a door you thought was decorative turns out to be load-bearing. The doors open, and certain men and women enter with the gravity of people who answer only to facts. Names you've seen on memos. Faces from quarterly town halls. The kind of presence that isn't celebrity but consequence. They move toward one man. Not the stage. Not the mic. They address him the way professionals address source code. Not user interface. Mr. Reed. The chairman says, respectful and plain. We're here. And just like that, the room understands the math. The man by the wall wasn't a prop. He was the ledger. The quiet wasn't emptiness. It was capacity. The title nobody knew he carried steps into the open and doesn't need an introduction controlling shareholder. The hand that set the table, while others argued about the centerpiece. Respect changes posture. Conversations edit themselves mid-sentence. The loudest opinions put their hands in their pockets and pretend they were only thinking out loud. He doesn't weaponize the moment. He standardizes it. He confirms that HR will proceed per policy. That compliance will conduct interviews. That facilities will coordinate access. He requests discretion for the sake of every employee not named in this story. He declines comment on marriage and speaks only to governance. It's not cold. It's correct. A man who's built anything worth keeping knows the difference. Ava reaches for an exception and finds precedent. She reaches for charm and finds protocol. She reaches for the audience. But the audience has become a record. Nothing she says will move the parts already in motion. There is no music high enough to drown out the sound of a door closing properly. He doesn't stay to harvest reactions. He lets structure continue its work and stands exactly as long as decency requires. Then he nods once to the people who answer to him because they answer to the company first. The weather has changed. The room knows it. He didn't raise his voice. He raised the standard. And now the identity you weren't supposed to see is simple to name, not a husband scorned. But the owner who finally chose to sign in public. Mercy is a choice. Boundaries are a requirement. The room finally understands why the air changed. The chairman arrives and doesn't face the stage. He faces Michael. We're here as requested. Mr. Reed. No flourish. No ceremony. Just the kind of greeting that tells everyone who built the ground under their shoes. The whispers turn inward. Little recalculations happening behind polite faces. Derek tries to blend into the wallpaper. Suddenly allergic to attention, Ava's confidence slides off her like makeup in the rain. The laugh is gone. The plea arrives. She reaches for the familiar tool's charm. Explanation. Selective memory, and finds they don't fit the lock. Michael doesn't glare or gloat. He does what steady men do when sentiment tries to bargain with structure. He confirms HR's action. Notes that compliance will conduct a full review of conduct at a corporate function, and requests that security escort Derek off company property to protect the integrity of the investigation and the event. No venom. Just sequence. He speaks in facts. He didn't sponsor her grades. He didn't forge her interviews. He opened doors that were hers to walk through. And he expected her to carry the same standards he holds himself to standards. She broke tonight in front of employees. Leadership. And the record? He doesn't repeat the insult. Because it isn't needed. The consequences already understand. She asks for mercy, as if mercy can overwrite policy. He offers clarity instead. Their prenup contains an infidelity clause, plain language. Mutual acknowledgement. Signed when neither of them was angry. Separation begins now. Council will coordinate disclosures. Temporary arrangements. And timelines. There will be no public statements. No social media, fireworks. No scavenger hunt for sympathy. This will be handled where grown decisions live on paper. With signatures. He reminds the chairman and the board that employees not involved deserve normalcy by morning. The music can resume. The staff can breathe. The company will keep moving because it was built to move regardless of any one person's drama. That is the point of systems. They carry the weight when people drop it. Never argue with a spectacle. End it with facts. A spectacle feeds on reaction. Facts feed on nothing. They stand whether the crowd claps or not. She buckles because nothing she can say is stronger than the documents already in force. He holds because nothing he needs requires this room to agree. For the men listening, this is where most stories fade to gossip. Ours doesn't. In a moment, we'll cover the 5 rules that keep you from ever begging for respect. Then we'll show you the aftermath, what gets returned, what gets revoked, what gets rebuilt. Tonight isn't about winning a scene. It's about owning your standards and walking out with them intact. You don't burn the house down. You lock the doors and call the locksmith. That's the rule for nights like this. Not rage. Not theater. Process. The noise fades, the instant consequence gets a job to do. The man who fed on attention is the first to lose his appetite. He's escorted toward daylight he didn't plan to see so soon. A reminder that some exits aren't personal, they're procedural. The audience looks away because procedure isn't exciting. And that's the beauty of it. Drama needs witnesses. Process needs signatures. Badges beep until they don't. Accounts breathe until access stops. There's a rhythm to corporate hygiene. And tonight, it plays in time. The team that speaks in bullet points. Time stamps. And custody chains moves through a checklist most people never realize exists until they need it. Inventory noted. Property logged. Statements scheduled. No one is cruel. No one is kind. They are correct. Michael doesn't weigh the room for sympathy. He's not here to win faces. He's here to keep the machine honest. He thanks the people whose job it is to be unshakable. Then he walks the quiet way out. The way used by people who carry weight without asking for applause. The corridor smells like fresh paint and duty. He prefers it to chandeliers. On the phone, his voice stays low. But the words have teeth. Separation begins now. Discovery opens financials. Communications. Timelines. Asset protection moves. He prepared years ago slide into place like they were waiting for tonight. Temporary orders. Counsel to counsel only. No public commentary. No third-party circus. He authorizes what must happen and declines what would only feel good. There's a difference. He honors it. Back in the room she chose as a stage. Silence replaces her script. The music returns without consulting her. Laughter resumes at a safer volume. People think about commutes and calendars again. That's how quickly a spectacle becomes an anecdote once the adults show up. She sits with the part of the evening that can't be undone. When respect leaves, momentum leaves with it. The world recalibrates. She is not the center of it. No one is. That's what systems mean. For the men keeping score, here's the whole play in 3 words. Document. Disengage. Delegate. Document what matters before you ever need it. Disengage from scenes designed to steal your center. Delegate the fire to the people who hold the extinguisher. HR. Legal. Security. Finance. This isn't cynicism. It's stewardship. You don't owe anyone a performance when you already have a plan. You don't owe a speech to people who preferred the spectacle to the standard. You owe yourself a clean exit and a morning that arrives on time. Let the paperwork speak. Let the doors close. Let the locksmith change the keys. And walk to your car with your name intact. A man's edge isn't volume. It's clarity and consequence. So here are the 5 rules that keep your name clean when the room gets loud. First, know your leverage. You don't need to parade it or preview it. Power that's announced is power that needs permission. Power that's kept is power that works. Leverage lives in preparation ownership. Contracts. Cash buffers. Documented value. It's the quiet math behind your decisions. You use it when it matters. Not to win an argument, but to set an outcome. Second, set boundaries early. And enforce them once. Boundaries aren't threats. They're standards. Decide what respect looks like in your life. Say it clearly, and mean it without theatrics. When the line is crossed, you don't negotiate with the crossing. You close the gate and move on. The person who needs 10 warnings isn't confused. They're auditing your resolve. Third, put it in writing. Feelings fade. Paperwork holds. If you love someone, tell the truth on paper while you still like each other. Prenups, postnups, operating agreements, house titles, insurance, beneficiary designations, access controls. Write the future before the storm arrives. Do the same at work policies, codes of conduct, performance records, clean email trails, meeting notes. Your memory is not evidence. Your signature is. Fourth, don't argue in chaos. Act with process. When the temperature spikes, the wisest move is to let systems do the talking. HR for conduct, legal for rights and remedies, security for access, finance for the numbers. You're not weak for delegating. You're disciplined. Fighting for optics is how you lose the plot. Following procedure is how you keep the frame. Fifth, protect your peace. Walk away with dignity and let consequences teach. You do not owe a public scene to people who ignored private standards. You owe yourself a tomorrow that isn't contaminated by tonight's adrenaline. The measure of a man isn't how loud he can get. It's how little noise he needs to do the right thing. If you've been through a moment like this public disrespect, private clarity. Tell your story. What rule saved you? Which one do you wish you'd learned 10 years earlier? Your lessons might spare another man a very expensive education. Next week, we take the other fork in the road when reconciliation is strength. And what conditions must exist for a second chance to be earned? Not begged. Come back for that conversation. Bring your standards with you. Some endings aren't loud. They're clean. Night rolls across the hood. City lights smear into a quiet ribbon. And Michael keeps his hands steady on the wheel, the way he kept his voice steady in the room. No victory lap. No replay. Just the relief that comes when a man honors his standards and lets the paperwork do the shouting he'll never need. He passes the marquee without looking. The show is over. The lesson isn't. He didn't win a crowd. He won himself. That's the kind of win you can drive home with. The kind that sleeps. The kind that wakes up tomorrow and gets back to work. There's nothing left to prove when the truth already did the heavy lifting. No speeches. No confetti. No edits. Only a straight road and a clear mind. Power is quiet. It doesn't chase the echo. It closes the door, locks it once, and hands the keys to the future you planned for. If you felt that tonight, if you've stood in a room that wanted a scene and chose a standard instead, say your piece. What would you have done at the mic, men? What boundary saved you once? Which line kept your name intact when the crowd tried to rewrite it? Your story has weight here. Drop it in the comments and teach someone what you learned the expensive way. If this hit you in the right place, tap like so, it reaches another man who needs it. Share it with a brother, a colleague, or a son who should understand the difference between spectacle and structure. And if you want the next chapter, the one where we talk about reconciliation, done with strength, not desperation, subscribe and turn on notifications so it finds you first. Some endings aren't loud. They're clean. Tonight, that's enough.